He is the CEO of Lumiio, a global digital health company, director and co-founder of a national patient organization dedicated to creating a world where all lives are powered by healthy mitochondria. Get a load of this. His involvement in rare disease advocacy and research began in 2008 with the tragic onset of a mitochondrial disease in his then 4-year-old son, Evan. Evan is a quadriplegic. He's 18 years old now, and while no one really knows what the future holds, this father of two is committed to giving his son the best life possible. He's been named Avenue Magazine's Top 40 Under 40. He organizes and participates in charity fundraising events. He holds 6 Guinness World Records. He's an elite runner, competed on the international stage with numerous ultra marathons, and his commitment to Evan, combined with his never say die attitude, has taken him on a journey that will leave you inspired, emotional, and asking yourself, what more can I do with my life? Please welcome to the Leadership Standard, Blaine Penny.
Thank you for the kind introduction. It's great to be here to speak with you, Gary. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, and we're going to dive right in, Blaine, because your story has really touched me in the sense that this was real life. You and Evan, can you start from the very beginning? We know that he had undergone a surgery, but something must have really hit you like a ton of bricks when you realized what kind of road was ahead. Is there a way you can kind of recreate when your life basically changed in one day?
Yeah, it's still haunting here to think back upon, how things unfolded that day, and what could we have done different, and to change the outcome for our son Evan. But yeah, essentially what happened was, Evan was this perfectly healthy, 4-year-old kid, and like literally woke up one morning with a sore stomach, and and it appeared that where he was pointing where that pain was, it looked like it was his appendix. So we went into the hospital, and they had a look, with an ultrasound. They couldn't see the appendix, so they thought it either ruptured or was hidden. They said, let's just be safe and take it out. And, completely unrelated to this situation, Evan actually was born with a major heart defect and had open heart surgery. So we had been through this massive gauntlet, or health gauntlet, when he was born. So we didn't think too much of this, to be honest. We're like, oh, it's just, appendicitis. That's nothing. So they wheeled him in, and, one sort of haunting thing that still gets me today was when we were wheeling him in, the last words he said to me, he looked up to me and stared me in the eyes. He said, "Daddy, can we play together again sometime?" And I didn't, I thought it was strange, but those words just stopped me dead in my tracks, and it felt like something more significant was about to unfold, even though I wasn't thinking that. And Evan's surgery went well. They removed his appendix, and his appendix was fine, but unfortunately Evan didn't wake up from the surgery, and they initially thought he had a reaction to the morphine, and then time started slipping by, 6, 12, 18 hours, eventually 36 hours, and they're like, they clearly realized something was wrong. And it was clear Evan had suffered a brain injury in that period, and slipped into a coma, didn't open his eyes for a week.
And then you realize the full extent. How did this finally unfold in a way, Blaine, that, because you've plunged us into what would any parent would go through in terms of panic and uncertainty, and then suddenly I'm thinking the veil gets a little bit lifted and you start to realize what you're up against.
Yeah, in some ways, we saw some, obviously Evan had suffered a severe brain injury, but he was initially diagnosed with a neurological disease that, 9 out of 10 kids would fully recover from. So we, one of the things we'll probably touch on a bit more here is around optimistically, we're, given everything Evan had been through, and I'm an optimist at heart. It's just like, okay, we've been through a lot before. We just need to rehab Evan back to health. And so we quickly sort of switched gears to the problem we had in front of us. So like, okay, how can we make it better, and how can we, do what we can to rehab his health and get him back walking, hopefully, eating and eventually talking would be incredible. But unfortunately, Evan didn't progress on that trajectory that we were all hoping for, and started developing seizures, and it was going downhill, and to a point where a few months after this initial incident, Evan was literally seizing hundreds of times a day. Basically just that's all he would do is it was seize and recover, seize and recover. So we went through this massive period of trying to solve those seizures, which took probably another 6 months. But that's when the doctors and the team continued to look for other answers to what was going on here, and they suspected some underlying, genetic metabolic disease. And about, I'm going to say 8 or 10 months after that onset, ordered some additional tests, and it was a year later that from that initial surgery that Evan got his diagnosis of an underlying mitochondrial disease, which was the result of this.
And just statistically, Blaine, how rare is this rare disease? We hear about rare diseases, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this, that you're not the only one who's ever had to, deal with an extremely rare disease.
Yeah, and in this case of mitochondrial disease, it affects about 1 in 4,000, and maybe even more people than that. With the advancements, some of the newer diagnostics, those rates seem to be increasing. But yeah, it's very similar to like a cystic fibrosis, actually, in terms of its incidence rate.
And so once you realized what you were up against in terms of a proper diagnosis a year later, tell us a little bit about the transformation that you went through, your family went through, to, shall we say, adjust to this new reality, even though those words themselves don't even do it justice.
Yeah, and our story is not uncommon, and many other families go through something similar that we went through, especially for diseases that are not well understood and don't have treatments and therapies. So essentially, we get that diagnosis, and and our doctor says, yeah, there's essentially there's no cure. There's minimal treatments. He put us on this vitamin cocktail that's supposed to help the mitochondrial function, called the Mitococktail. And then he pointed me to a US organization called the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, and they host an annual symposium down in the US, and they have it attracts researchers and clinicians as well as patients and families, and it's an opportunity to meet other families and learn about the disease. So off I went, and first was to educate myself and for Sarah and I to learn more about this disease and what it means. And then meet some other families, and then learn about how can we navigate, the systems and support and care that we're going to need to do our best for Evan. So then when we, literally I came back from that conference, and I had met several other, Canadians down there, and we're like, man, there's nothing in Canada. There was no organization, there's no groups, nothing that we're doing anything to support families, raise funds for research or create awareness and education. So we sort of made a pact and said, okay, when we get back, let's talk about doing something. And we did. So when we got back, every Sunday night for several months, we would get on the phone and talk about, what we could do to help other families. And that was, the beginning of what eventually became Mito Canada.
And now these efforts to actually make a difference, to take Evan's story and your experience, has brought us into this world of Lumiio, and you're on a mission. And I want you to explain, Blaine, exactly the mission you're on, because I think it's extremely worthwhile. And you've had the firsthand experience of dealing with this, but just tell us a little bit about Lumiio and the efforts you're doing to fill, I'm going to say, close the gaps in terms of service and help for families in similar situations.
Yeah, and I'll say it kind of, the path that led me to Lumiio, and meeting the team there and being part of this team, I would say started back, 13, 14 years ago, when we were in that ideation stage with Mito Canada, thinking about what would be important for us to, what are the areas that we would want to focus on as an organization, and how can we help you know advocate for this disease on behalf of that patient community, and what type of information data would we need. So establishing a patient registry was one of the first things that we wanted to do, but to be honest, it's sort of a black box in the world of in patient organizations, and in the I'd say somewhat in the rare disease space, and that is not well understood as to who owns it, who inputs the data and how's the data used, excuse me, and all those sort of things. But it was about 2 years ago, I met Dr. Lawrence Korngut, who is one of the co-founders of Lumiio. And he was telling me about all the exciting work that they were doing at Lumiio and some of the other companies he was involved in. And Lawrence, he's a neurologist who focuses on neuromuscular diseases. And early in his clinical career, he saw a massive gap in the neuromuscular disease patients that he was treating, and got together with some other clinicians across the country, and they started the Canadian Neuromuscular Disease Registry. And it was through that work and the success that they had there that other research institutes and patient organizations and pharmaceutical companies were asking, hey, can you help us develop similar data programs and registries for other diseases? And that was how Lumiio was born. So so obviously I had that initial connection with Lawrence and understanding that they were working on something that was near and dear to my heart. And within the mitochondrial disease space, we were looking at how could we build a data informatics platform that was going to help support patient advocacy and accelerate a pathway to new therapies and hopefully a cure or cures one day.
Now, for those, and before we go any further, I'm just acutely aware of some of our viewers and some of our listeners. For those who struggled with high school biology like I did, can you somehow explain mitochondrial disease? What is, some people would be wondering, like myself, well, what is a mitochondria?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is you and I, Garrett, and everybody else that's tuning in to listen to this, have a connection to what to the work that we're doing, because you all have mitochondria, and one thing we do know is that as we age and get older, our mitochondria become less and less productive and functional. But the role of the mitochondria is essentially it's the powerhouse of our cells. So it takes the food we eat and the oxygen we breathe and literally turns it into energies in our cells in the form of ATP. I don't know if you've ever heard of ATP, but essentially that's what it does. It is the batteries of our cells that power those cells. So if your mitochondria doesn't function properly, you have cells that don't function properly. And if you have enough cells that don't function properly, then that impacts organs. And then obviously at an extreme level, it can impact life.
So the power plant or the battery packs for our cells. So at a very cellular level, this is extremely critical that we have things like national databases. Just expand on that a little bit, Blaine, because I think if I understand correctly, what Mito Canada is doing in terms of raising $4 million for research, that sounds like just a drop in the bucket for what needs to be done to help better understand conditions like this.
Yeah, I mean, it is just scratching the surface, but I mean, most importantly, it's bringing together the patient community that it serves, right? And providing that connection and that sense of community and connectedness between each other is extremely important. But in terms from a data standpoint, so these many rare diseases, like 80% of rare diseases are genetic, and some of these diseases such as mitochondrial disease are quite complex. Say compared to like cystic fibrosis, which is essentially a single mutation or potentially a couple of mutations. But for mitochondrial disease, there's actually about 1,400 different mutations in our genome that could result in a mitochondrial disease. So it's very, very complicated. So having that depth of understanding all the different subsets of a disease, and interestingly enough, two people that may have the same genetic mutation or the exact same disease may present completely differently in terms of their symptoms. So just because they have the same disease doesn't mean their symptoms will manifest the same way. So again, having that data through registries and expanded data programs help us better understand and study the differences and the complexities amongst these diseases as new therapies are being developed.
So we know the mission you're on is very personal. It can't get any more personal. Let's talk about healthcare professionals. Why do healthcare professionals want to be aware of Lumiio and what you and your team are doing?
Yeah, I think most importantly for healthcare professionals to know about the exciting work that we're doing at Lumiio is to see that we're able to provide um, innovative technologies and approaches to use data to better understand the disease and track patient outcomes over time, and in particular in rare diseases where as you often don't have enough patients to do proper random controlled trials, for instance, and wouldn't be ethical to put them on, say, a placebo in a random controlled trial, which is the standard for developing new therapies. So the data that we would collect, over time becomes like a natural history study, and that data over time can then be used in things such as like single arm trials to see how patients respond to a therapy. So it really provides that control that would not otherwise be there to demonstrate that a new therapy could be effective and beneficial.
You are an engineer, I understand, before you by trade,
Yep.
right? And so I'm thinking that background has served you well. You're also an ultra marathoner. So I'm curious, how does the ultra marathoner slash engineer, how have those pursuits, if you will, helped you on this particular journey that you're on?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, in their late 40s in life would look at where they are and never predicted where they would end up in life and the path that would have taken them there. But certainly I would say, as I think back on my training and, almost 20-year career as a practicing engineer, one of the foundational things, or a few of the foundational things that I'm grateful for are problem solving, right? And that's what a big part of engineering is, problem solving. And I've always sort of taken that approach to every aspect of what I do, whether it's my work, whether it's in my life, so that also gave me the opportunity through my engineering work to get exposure to a lot of different types of organizations and take on different roles, and that's sort of what I guess was sort of gave me the exposure and opportunity to follow a path of in management and leadership, which I've greatly appreciated. And then as I think about the running, I've always been really active, and but I would say a couple things about the running. There was a moment very early in when Evan got sick, and we just didn't know. We were in the hospital 24/7 by his bedside, waiting for test results, looking for answers, and just kind of banging our heads against a wall, frustrated with where things were. And I'll never forget the doctor, stopped by one day and very kindly and gently said, we know how much you love your son. And we know how important it is for you to be here, but you need to get rest. You need to look after yourself, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after Evan. And that really resonated with me. And I would say, from there, I was like, okay, I need to look after my health. And that's when I kind of threw myself into running, which I became very passionate about over time. And to be honest, become my stress relief, has become my social community, my friends, and something I love dearly and get the joy of every day.
So just paint a picture, so anyone watching or listening can really get a sense of life at home with Evan and how that impacts the family.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think about Evan's gone through, he's just gone through so much, a lot of pain. Evan went through a period of 3 years, a number of years ago, where he basically screamed incessantly for 3 years while we tried to work with his clinical team to understand what was going on. And we eventually, both my wife and I, being engineers, were convinced it was a plumbing issue with his GI system, and eventually worked with his team and decided that we wanted to do an ileostomy to bypass his lower bowel, which solved the problem, which was amazing. So, we've had to become a de facto quarterback of his health, interacting with, Evan was in 13 different specialist clinics over the years. So we're interacting with all these specialists. We had, as Evan had, initially in the early days, we had no help at all. We were just like, we were his sole caregivers looking after him. But then as he got older and bigger and his needs increased, we found out there was some respite care available to give us some breaks and to help there. And then eventually we were able to get a full-time live-in caregiver who was a trained nurse from the Philippines, who was sort of a gift in our lives. And she lived with us for 7 or 8 years. So, Evan's care team had become central in our house. And to be honest, like, our house didn't really, it was interesting because Evan moved into a group home a few months ago. So it's been a big transition for us, but our house was almost like a care facility, and there wasn't a lot of privacy. So that obviously had impacts on our daughter, who was exposed to more than one should ever see at her young age in terms of challenges that Evan faced. And then, it obviously impacted how we interact with her and tried to spend quality time with her. So yeah, it had a really broad impact.
Is that something, I'm just guessing, and I'm kind of almost thinking out loud a little bit, but we always want these conversations to just, because yourself, we didn't rehearse anything, we didn't plan anything before we went on, but I'm just thinking, those experiences, Blaine, must give you incredible insight to help other families going through different things, because it's not just Evan, it's like you said, it's your daughter, it's your spouse, it's all these different dynamics. There's got to be a ripple effect, if you will, that this causes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the things that we experience is just when you have a complex needs child, the health system is not set up to say, here is everything that's available to help you. And unfortunately, and all credit, my wife, Sarah, is the most savvy person to figure out how to find the help and what's available. But it took us years to get, and we're still, to be honest, it's a continuous journey of finding what's available. So anything we can do to help others, and certainly we had tons of help along the way. I think in the early days there was, we were introduced to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and they were phenomenal at help us navigate some of the social supports, how to get access to respite, some of the other programs that were available, like, they have a program for to make it, but to get every kid a bike, and things like that just you wouldn't otherwise know. So that, connecting with others that are going through something similar is extremely important. So that's been a big part of why we want to give back and help others avoid some of the I guess mistakes and challenges that we made, but also, hopefully ease their path as well.
I think now I'm going to ask the question that everyone's thinking: where do you and Sarah find your strength?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it comes down, we get it from each other. I mean, we're, I think, a lot of people who go what we go through, I don't know how to best describe it. I mean, 8 out of 10 couples going through what we've gone through would not make it through as an intact family. And so in the early days, we really made the effort to to embrace this challenge that we had ahead of us, and we grew closer together as a couple, and drew strength from that. But also, I would say, we looked after our health. We had strong, support from our friend network. We're very, very fortunate in that sense. Our work supported us. It was just, as they say, it takes a village. It really, truly, it was a city in our case of support to get us through. And but and I remember in the early days, it was just, it was just day to day was so challenging, and there's so many unknowns, and we would, we'd get through a day with a deep sigh and like, we did it, and we literally like, okay, like let's just sleep and we can get up and we can do it again tomorrow. So we really just faced it day by day, and we didn't get too far ahead of ourselves, but yeah, it was a work in progress and still is, to be honest.
This would be the appropriate time, Blaine, to ask you the question that we ask everyone on the leadership standard. We have this one question, and I'm very, very curious. Given all that you've been through and that your family's experienced, how would you define leadership?
Yeah. Um, you know, I would define leadership, I guess, as I guess taking on, the challenge of an initiative, or something you care about, or leading a group of people, or a company in such a way that, people understand what the end goal is, and people are inspired to, to be part of something that's bigger than themselves, and are mission oriented. So I think, leadership is all about painting that vision of, why one needs to solve a problem, and why we should come together to to work really hard for something. But really, it's I would say it's it's inspiring others to step up outside their comfort zone, and be, to challenge themselves in ways that they never would have, and surprise themselves in terms of what they are truly capable of.
Well, in terms of capability and finding out what you're made of, I believe, if our research is correct here, that you hold the Guinness World Record for running the longest as a human battery. Am I reporting the facts correctly here, Blaine?
You're close. You're close. It was the record was for the fastest marathon, wearing a battery costume, which was in Toronto, I believe, in 2018, the Toronto Marathon.
And you've done many of these marathons, ultra marathons, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers. I can't help but think that the running must do something else for you personally.
Yeah, it does a lot for me. I would say, like, to be honest, it's a day to day. I just get joy from it. To be honest, like I say, it's the people I've met through running are some of my closest and best friends. It attracts an amazing group of people, but also it's a real. What I learned is the running community is so strong, and it's a massive community, um, and they and most runners want to do something above and beyond themselves. So we found it to be a tremendous platform as well for raising awareness and funds for mitochondrial disease, and of course many other charities, take a similar path. And that's why we've done all these Guinness World Records. It's just such a unique way to make your cause stand out, and in particular, the rationale behind the battery was, as I was mentioning earlier, the mitochondria is the battery of the cell, and you can't see it on the costume, but on the back I've got a low battery symbol, or a low power symbol. So really that was just a costume to facilitate a conversation around, people who have mitochondrial disease are running on low battery power. So we were using our energy, to run for those who can't. Yeah, so this is a really exciting week as well for our global mitochondrial disease community, and in particular here in Canada. Mito Canada is lighting up over 56 monuments across the country, including like the Calgary Tower, the TELUS Spark Center here in Calgary, Niagara Falls, as a way to raise awareness and commemorate Mitochondrial Disease Awareness Week. So for everyone, keep an eye out on the evening of of September 24th, and you'll see green lit up in the sky.
Well, it obviously worked. And having said that, I know that you've been a leader, Blaine, in small startups, in corporate conglomerates, and some very personal charities. Um, how do how how does your leadership style, because we do like to explore the subject of leadership on this program, how does your leadership style change depending on who you're working with, what the project is, or does it change at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, there's certainly very different, I guess, domains or environments of how work gets done. But I would say that, you know, there are more similarities than differences. And this is obviously just my personal view on this. But, you know, I think it starts with, being an authentic person, being that authentic leader who you are, really shouldn't change in any of those environments. And, I think about, everyone wants to feel a sense of accomplishment from their work, be part of, high performing and winning teams, feel like their work matters. They want to learn, they want to grow, and they want to meet interesting people. So I think whether you're in some large, corporate organization or some small startup or working for a charity, those are all similarities. But of course, maybe one of the bigger differences is, there's different motivations when you work in those environments. Obviously, some of those are paid, or in some charities, they're volunteer driven. Certainly a lot of smaller charities. So really thinking about what are the what motivates people, and what gets them excited when they wake up in the morning, I would say, are some of the nuances between the two.
You every month, I know, walk into a real leadership arena with your TEC Canada group, where members in these peer advisory groups are really forced to examine and re-examine all kinds of things about their leadership style and their skills. That would be an interesting angle to take in this conversation, Blaine. How is that TEC Canada experience illuminated, if you will, what you've come to understand about leadership?
Yeah, I think first things first is, we learn that we're not alone. In that, when you're wearing the CEO hat, the buck basically stops at you. Of course, we report to a board and shareholders, but from an operational day-to-day basis, you have a lot on your mind all the time, right? And I would say, meeting the TEC group, and the candidness and openness that I guess as part of the culture of the TEC leadership forums is really helpful in that, it's a really safe environment for leaders to really be honest about some of their challenges, but also be open to how others can help. And everyone is there because they want to be able to contribute to help others, but also to learn and take away from others. So I think there's this sense of we're not alone in this, and there's a lot we can learn from each other, and that's been tremendously insightful and helpful for me, that's for sure.
And maybe, just maybe, you want to do a shameless shout out for your chair or some other member or two that's really been helpful.
Yeah, Barry Brad has been a great chair for the group that I'm part of, and a fantastic group of CEO leaders I've gotten to know over the last year or so. And it's I really appreciate Barry, who's an accomplished leader himself, and for him this is his way to give back, and helping others through his experiences. So it's been tremendous, and he's a fantastic chair and mentor. So I'm grateful that I've gotten to meet him and part of his group.
Everyone loves to hear those success stories, but I'd love to hear a little bit about how leadership got real, the setback that forced you to become and forced you to re-examine how you lead. Can you expand on that? You know the saying, Blaine, they say failure is a great teacher. Is there something that happened along your journey that you go, yeah, I learned from that one?
Yeah. As I think back, obviously there's this, lots of, we're always learning, and many challenges along the way. But I think back to maybe one of the periods where I joined. I left one of the largest engineering firms in the world, and made a big leap of faith to join a small startup engineering firm as their CEO. And I think I came as employee number 3 or 4 at that point, and they had an ambitious goal of growing quickly, and concept around how we were going to structure that ownership in the early days. And and as we grew quickly, within 18 months we grew to 18 people within, or sorry, about 35 people within the team. And things were things were flying by the seat of our pants, and things were really moving quickly. And and sort of that I guess the philosophy of that ownership approach changed over time. And I struggled with that, and I didn't agree with that, and I felt it was going to impede me from doing my job, to be honest, to the way I felt I wanted to lead. So I made that tough decision to leave. And but yeah, no regrets. It was a tremendous experience, but yeah, it was a tough decision, because I was really vested for a sort of a 10-year commitment there to build a company.
I mean, you've still got a long road ahead of you, of course, but, and other than the 6 Guinness World Records that you're a part of, I'd be curious to know, what do you view as your biggest accomplishment to date, either personally or professionally?
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest. I don't look back a whole lot and say, well, this accomplishment or that accomplishment. It's, I tend to cherish them for maybe a couple of hours and then move on whenever I do accomplish something, and on to the next challenge. But to be honest, I really, as I think about this, I'd say what I'm most proud of, to be honest, is maintaining sort of that positive outlook, through this immense trauma and grief that we've gone through, I've gone through personally over the last 14 years. Like, it's been a tough road, and I guess I'm proud to say that I've made it this far, and I have a very optimistic outlook on the future, and I'm really proud of the work as a father and looking after Evan's care, and to be honest, to have the luxury of the opportunities that I've had along the way to really be able to give back and have an impact in organizations like Mitochondria and Lumiio. So
Hmm.
I still think it's all in the making, and I feel there's still so much work to be done, but to have this opportunity to be doing such extremely rewarding work is I'm extremely grateful for that. So yeah, it's yeah, just very fortunate, I guess.
I'd be, how do I say this? So many companies pride themselves on having mission statements, or they talk about mission and vision and values, and you've heard it too, Blaine, very, these lofty proclamations. Rarely do I meet someone like you whose mission is so clearly aligned. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you've come to learn about personal alignment with mission and the causes you're involved in.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see from this picture, a picture says it all, right? It's my boy Evan in the wheelchair there, and my daughter Julia, and my wife Sarah. I think about quality of life is front and center to me. Like, for Evan, honestly, sitting in that wheelchair comfortably is quality of life for Evan, and not being in pain. And as I think more broadly about that, it's about health span. How do we extend that healthy period in someone's life? Uh, but as it relates to me and my personal missions, like, early detection of diseases and diagnosis enables earlier interventions, right? Had we known Evan had an underlying genetic disease, we would have taken a different approach that morning walking to the hospital. So feel very strongly about that, and that's a lot of work ahead of us, and that's some of the important work that Lumiio is doing. Hence, being there, and then secondly I would say is putting the tools in the hands of patients, and the information in the hands of patients, so they can be more empowered to make better decisions and less reliant upon the the fragmented health system out there today, so we can truly work towards better health outcomes and get away from this sick care to true health care, right? The tools and the data and the technology is emerging now where patients are going to be able to have that information in their hands and be able to make more informed decisions. So I feel very strongly about that and want to be part of making that happen.
With respect to Evan, while his photograph is there, describe his day-to-day life? I know people are curious and no one wants to come out and ask, but
Yeah.
you sense that too when people get tentative. How would you describe it, Blaine, in terms of what Evan can do and what he's capable of?
Yeah. So Evans, he's a spastic quadriplegic. He has no voluntary motor control of his body at all. We see his world through his eyes. I mean, it's his expression is everything. But yeah, I mean, Evan, so he's completely reliant on others for everything that happens in his day. So up until this year, I mean, Evan graduated from grade 12 in the spring. So he went to school, which was a big part of his life and joy, I think, in his social interactions. And for the most part, when he wasn't struggling with some health ailment and in pain, he's a happy kid and got a lot of joy and participation in school and really positive feedback there. But now, since he's been shifted into a group home, which is part of this transition, was to provide a better environment for that care and also that social interaction that he so desperately needs, that's challenging to provide for him here at our house. So yeah, so he's got a one-on-one nursing care, and they get out in the community for walks and to the mall and to different events and things like that. So they're very active in getting him out and about and interacting within his house. So yeah, that's a big part of Evan's day-to-day life right now.
If I'm not mistaken, the research tells us, because you can just go on to Google and find it out, I think you were dubbed a kick-ass Calgarian, I believe. Is that the right phrase, Blaine?
Kick-ass Canadian, apparently.
Kick-ass Canadian from Calgary. You're a very inspirational person, to say the least, but who inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people inspire me, but I would say when I think about, one of my biggest inspirations, is an Antarctic explorer named Ernest Shackleton from the early 1900s. I don't know if you know Shackleton's story, but it was the story of him leading an expedition across to traverse the South Pole in Antarctica, and their ship, the Endurance, got crushed in the ice and sunk, and they spent 2 years stranded on ice floes and on an island. And he was an amazing leader who kept his team motivated, kept them fed, kept them warm, kept them, gave them hope that they were going to get out of this thing alive, which was really slim chances at that time. But he had this incredible leadership style that I've really come to appreciate. So yeah, he's been I love reading stories about him and that story in particular. But yeah, Shackleton's a massive inspiration. But day to day, it's my son Evan, right? Like, I just look at what that guy has endured and continues to endure, and what it does, everything he's been through, and he's able to put a smile on my face. It really humbles me and inspires me.
Let's go up close and personal. I understand you've been all the way to Tuktoyaktuk and back, right? There isn't much you haven't seen in business and life, but I do want to get a more personal side of Blaine Penny out here. So, one-on-one dinner date with anyone, dead or alive, who would you dine with?
Oh, goodness me. Oh, that's a good question. I'm a huge U2 fan, and I've always wanted to meet Bono. And obviously, Bono has used his platform as one of the greatest rock stars of all time to do amazing things. So I've really admired that about him as well. But yeah, if I could sit down with Bono over dinner sometime, that would be amazing.
And how many U2 concerts have you attended?
I think at least three. Yeah, the last one was in Berlin, Germany, which was just amazing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can relate. It was in Torino, Italy.
Wow.
So it's a different concert experience, to be sure.
Yeah.
Blaine, what books are you reading right now?
Oh, I've got a few on the go right now. I am reading, yeah, I'd say it's three books. So one is it's called Obviously Awesome. Is all about product positioning, which is a big part of what we're doing right now in my work at Lumiio. I'm reading another book right now called The 5 a.m. Club, 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma around the. I've always been an early bird and appreciate getting up early and getting a quick start on the day, and that's when I'm most productive. And then I'm also about a week and a half out from the London Marathon. So I'm reading this book called On Pace, which is a great reminder of, how we pace in running and other things in life. So yeah, I got a few on the go right now.
So in terms of, now let's get into the real nitty gritty, Blaine, in terms of binge watching recommendations, because everyone's looking for a good reco on binge watching. What
Yeah.
series would you recommend?
Oh yeah, definitely Better Call Saul.
With Jim, isn't it? Slippery
Yeah.
Jim, Slippy Jim?
Yep, Slipper Jim, Slipper Jimmy, Slippin' Jimmy.
Slippin' Jimmy.
But and I would say before watching Better Call Saul, they had to watch Breaking Bad. So those two are my favorite two of all time.
Let's go somewhere else. If day-to-day life at your company was like a movie or TV show, what would it be?
Oh, to be honest, as much as I like watching, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, I actually don't watch a whole lot of TV. Yeah, that's a good question. Struggling with that one, to be honest.
Please don't say it's The Office.
It's definitely not The Office. And it's maybe somewhere between The Office and like ER.
Okay. Okay.
I'll let people use their imagination on that.
I think the panel would agree. You're alone. Never mind the running for a second, Blaine. You're alone in your car. What do you think about the most?
I would say it is the solitude and opportunity to just turn off everything and just enjoy the moment. Yeah, the surroundings, think, reflect.
I have to ask you this. In terms of where you want to take Lumiio, what is the vision, the big picture vision you hold for this right now? I think your cause is so incredible. Your mission is incredibly worthy, but what is the vision?
Yeah, I mean, our true vision is around impact, and we've set a goal by 2030 to impact 1,000 patient communities. And to add to that, I would say it's our vision that we want to help provide patients with data and technology to help them own their health journey. Really, I mean, that's what we really want to achieve. And ultimately, I think the holy grail of what we can accomplish as outcomes are to be able to build upon what we have today in terms of expanding the data programs and further integration of artificial intelligence to predict changes in health and disease states that allow for earlier intervention and detection that can prevent or treat diseases earlier and improve people's quality of life. I think that's the best we could hope for.
And taking all of these experiences that you've had and then looking at leaders everywhere who are listening and watching right now, what is the number one question that leaders need to be asking?
Yeah. Am I truly thinking about what we're doing today is going to benefit our customer tomorrow? And
Can you
are we
expand? Can you
providing?
expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, like I think sometimes we can get caught up into, creating products and um, without really understanding, the end customer or the end user. How is it truly going to benefit them, and why should they care? So really, it's just staying grounded to who you serve.
And in terms of um, our viewers and listeners who want to reach out, connect with you, how do they find you, Blaine? And give us some guidance on that.
Yeah, you can you can probably probably the easiest way to reach me is through LinkedIn, or just feel free to drop me an email, blaine@lumio.com.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time, because I think this has just been such an interesting conversation around taking, how to turn tragedy into positivity. Incredibly inspiring story. And thanks again, Blaine, for taking the time to spend with us here.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks again, Blaine Penny, for joining us here on the Leadership Standard. And if you want to know more about TEC Canada and its world-class programs, check out the website, www.tec-canada.com. What was it that Blaine spoke of that really made you stop, think, reflect? I know for me, I'll forever have those words of his son etched in my memory, those last words he spoke before going into surgery, and how that profoundly impacted his entire life and that of his family. But what was your biggest takeaway? What were your insights? Please feel free to share your thoughts with our email address, podcast@tec-canada.com. And if you enjoyed the Leadership Standard, by all means, feel free to share with others in your network. This is an important cause and mission that Blaine's part of. So the more we can share this, and the more you can like and comment and subscribe, all the better, because you just never know when we might somehow inspire others to grab hold of the clutch and go full throttle in this new frontier. So on behalf of everyone at the TEC Canada production office back in Calgary, Melissa, Alexander, Stephen, Kat, Mark Johnson, executive producer, this is Gare Maxwell, thanking you again so much for joining us for the Leadership Standard.